Hi, my name is Hannah Ducharme. Today I'm talking about the movie and documentary Citizen 4, which is basically the story of Edward Snowden, who, while he was working for NSA or being used by NSA, he released private confidential documents that basically revealed that NSA has access to all of our emails, websites that we visited, phone records, like duration of phone calls, who we were calling, and basically any information that crosses international borders. So it kind of mentioned how, you could be emailing someone who's sitting across the room from you, and to get to that, say you're using Gmail, maybe Gmail has a server that's in London. To send that email is going to go outside of the US, therefore crossing borders, and is going to be collected by this mass database. And then, so that email, before it gets across the room, is going out of the country and then back in. And that email, what you were saying, who you're talking to, is kept in a storage unit, this big database, and can be looked at by NSA. And this information is all stored, and basically no one knew about this really before Edward Snowden released it. And NSA, it showed, still actively denied that they had any record of any of this information. So it's kind of the main themes of this movie. Right from the beginning, it talked about that one of the main things was just about the wronging of Americans, and kind of just that, NSA is doing all this stuff. Everything is being watched that we're completely unaware of, and so many Americans didn't know about this. They're looking into our private lives, and I think a big theme in the movie was, should this be up for a debate? Basically, should this have been kept from us, and also, do they even have a right to look into our private information? Is this even a matter of public safety, basically? And like I said, should this be up for debate? Should Americans have a say in whether or not what the government is allowed to look at? Because I understand from the viewpoint, this started happening basically after 9/11. Obviously, the security of the whole entire country went up, but what I personally thought of, I guess, and we talked about this in class also, was I don't necessarily mind them looking at my Facebook, looking at things like that. I am not a threat to America, but I understand obviously people are, and so that's what they're looking for. But I mean, every single American's email records, phone records, is that a matter of public safety? And something I found really interesting was one of the clips in the video talked about linkability. And so the example that they used was, say, your Metro card. You live in New York City, and your Metro card is linked to your debit card. So maybe it can automatically refill or pay with money. But then you have your debit card is linked to your bank account, and that's linked to a bank statement, and that bank statement shows when you're buying gas. So maybe that shows where you are, what town you're in. And then it shows deposits that you make, so you're getting paid where you work then. And then it shows coffee, where you like to go frequently, and it shows purchases at the grocery store, so what you're buying. Basically, this is metadata, and they talked about how this tells a story basically of kind of who you are, not necessarily, but what you do, where you're going, who you call frequently, maybe what you're talking about. And so they're saying this tells a story of who you are through all these facts. It's a fact that you bought toilet paper yesterday for $5. But say that NSA is trying to look at some crime, and it shows that you were at that grocery store last weekend, at the same time that a crime happened. And so now you're a person of interest because you just happened to be there, and because NSA has records that you were there. So now you can be framed for this crime possibly, and you can be looked into this, and your privacy can be violated even though you were just there buying toilet paper. And so NSA looks at this as facts, but really it's not a hard cold fact, and so NSA can kind of pin that on you. Another thing that I really found interesting was that kind of talked about state power versus people's ability to oppose that power, and that was actually something that Ed Snowden said, and he was basically saying why he did this, and he was saying if any policy changes regarding what NSA can and can't do, then we can't necessarily oppose that. If they get the right, and they were doing this and were lying about it, but if they actually get that right to look into our emails, our phone records, everything, then what can we do basically? but they're already doing this anyways. But he's basically saying, like, if we don't have our right to privacy, then how can we have our right to, like, a free and open discussion? And what good is our freedom of speech that we have if it's not protected? And what I found really interesting was because, like, one guy said, liberty is often linked to freedom, and freedom, a lot of people are now considering privacy. And so without privacy, are we technically no longer free? And basically, I'm not disagreeing. I completely agree with the fact that NSA shouldn't be looking into all of our private lives. But what I found interesting was people were talking about it in the video almost as if we had lost our freedom of speech. And technically, if you're looking at this, we still have our freedom of speech. We're still allowed to say what we say. But I do understand that privacy is being violated, that it's being looked at by NSA. But I don't necessarily equate liberty and freedom to privacy. I think those are totally different things. But then again, as I'm saying it, I kind of understand how freedom is really linked to privacy, because if nothing is private, then what do you have? Like, if I'm in the privacy of my own room right now, if that's being surveyed, then am I technically free if I'm always being watched? And I think that was a huge main theme of the movie too, is, what is freedom and how exactly is privacy affecting this? And another thing, people were saying, like, what else could this lead to, kind of? Like, if NSA gets this right to legally look into all of our phone records and everything that I've mentioned, then what would happen next? Like, it's almost, what would if that was passed, then, like I said, what would happen next? Like, what would be limited to us personally? Like, would anything be just between, like, me and whoever I'm emailing? And back to kind of like the linkability thing, like just being in the wrong spot at the right time. The video kind of talked about, or at least one guy talked about, how like NSA and the FBI can almost like attack any single person if they perceive that they have an advantage in that situation. But you could be in a huge disadvantage. Like I said, if you're buying toilet paper at that grocery store and, NSA sees that you're there, then like they have every right to go and target you. And the video, I think, mentioned that, now NSA, I don't think, it was like since 2015, NSA doesn't have access to these phone records anymore, but they can still get warrants to go and access them. So it's like, what really is being regulated, like what is being done? And I think that was another huge thing, is, so what are we going to do about this? And it was interesting, in class we talked about how a lot of people didn't even know who exactly Edward Snowden was, and a lot of people almost denied it. They were like, oh no, the government or NSA isn't looking into all of this, but they are, and that's really interesting to me. Another really interesting that I thought of was that he was charged, with multiple felonies, but one was the Espionage Act, which, his lawyers talked about in the video, but they put him on the same level as being a spy or as someone against his country. And the Espionage Act was originally created to prevent insubordination in the military and to protect the U.S. military from their enemies and from spies who are selling, war information to other countries. And they put this man at the same level as one of these, almost as if he was a traitor to his country, when he was doing this for his country, because he knew that this was a violation of Americans' rights and that we deserve that privacy. And even if we're not getting that privacy, then we deserve to know. We deserve to know that we're being surveyed, that they're watching what we do, and that we're watching what we buy and all of this stuff. And he was doing that for his country, and now his country, who was in the wrong to begin with, is putting him at the same level as a traitor. And now he's in Russia and probably won't come back unless, well, if he comes back, he's going to jail. And so, like I said, they're punishing him and putting him at this level as someone who did such a horrid crime. And what he did was illegal. I understand that it was a criminal act, but he did that, and he said, back to the whole state power thing, he did that saying it was all worth it, because if we don't have this power to like protect ourselves from the state and their mass authority, then like what do we have, basically? And so those were some things that I found interesting about this, and just going back to it just kind of sparked all these questions with me. And so just back to some of the main themes I think it was really just like, what is freedom to us? Like, we need to think about what freedom means and what does our privacy mean to us, and how much power should the government have in, regulating this privacy, and when does this become a matter of public safety? Like, when should people step in? What should be monitored? How much should be monitored? If it is, how long is it going to be, looked at for? How long is this information being stored? And just kind of like, what power do we have, and how much power should the state and the government have? And really just like, what is our freedom to us? What does freedom entail? And I think those were some of the main themes, and things that I found interesting about the movie. Thanks.